Hi, the goal of this lecture was to discuss pair programming. Pair programming is one of the many technical practices we have been discussing, and in particular, pair programming is quite popular in extreme programming, one of the most popular agile methodologies. And the ideal of pair programming is that instead of having one person working on the task, you have two people working on the same task. And you have two people, we usually divide them into the driver, and the driver is the one focusing on writing the code, and the other one is the navigator, or the co-pilot as we call, and this person is the one that is reviewing the code, talking with the driver to see if this is the best solution. And the ideal of pair programming is not that strange in other fields. In the pictures I show, for example, two pilots piloting an airplane, or a lot of medical surgeons doing a surgery. So working on the same task with more than one person is quite normal in other fields, and that's what we're trying to do in software engineering. But to do pair programming decently, it can be tricky. You have two people, and these two people, they need to work together. They need to communicate all the time. And usually we see some sort of different roles for this, for the pilot and for the co-pilot. And the pilot is the person that is close to the keyboard, and this person is usually very focused on the syntax, on the APIs he or she is using. Focusing on the best practices of your programming language. So he's very low level. And the navigator is the person that is more focused on the big picture. Questions like, is it what we want to build, or are there other tests we need to do? Is this the solution we want to have? And the navigator supports the driver in the tasks. And these two people, they have to communicate all the time for this to work well. There are many objectives, there are many reasons why we do pair programming. For example, we have continuous code review, because now we have a second pair of eyes looking to our code and giving us ideas. We have less defects, because hopefully two people together, they are able to find more defects than just a solo developer. You have better code, and that happens because you're going to have different perspectives on the same source code. You have one, your co-pilot has another. You're going to discuss for the better solution. We have knowledge sharing. So if I'm pair programming with a person that knows a lot about Python, I'm going to learn from this person. Or if I'm pair programming with a person that knows a lot about the domain, the software that we're building, I'm going to learn more about the domain with this person. Pair and peer pressure is something that also happens, and it's quite beneficial. When you're pair programming with someone, you don't want to waste the time of this person, right? So you don't want to open your personal email when the person is near you, because you don't want to spend her time. So this natural pressure that happens when you're doing pair programming makes you focus a bit more. You can say some effort in intra-team documentation, because again, you're always working with somebody else, and maybe you don't need to go to documentation, because then the person is right next to you. And finally, it is a nice way to welcome new members. So instead of telling to the new developer in the team to just go read the source code or read the documentation, you just pair program with them, and this person will get to know you better. This person will get to know the source code from someone that already knows it. So lots of teams actually use pair programming as a way to introduce new people in the team. There are lots of research on the effects of pair programming. I'm pointing you to a literature review, a meta-analysis actually on many different studies on pair programming, and you can see there that most studies show that pair programming has a positive overall effect, meaning in quality, meaning when you do pair programming, you deliver software with higher quality than when you're not doing pair programming. In terms of duration, the time you take to do the task, if you're doing pair programming, you're going to take less time than if you were doing this solo. But in terms of cost, you have a medium negative effect, because again, you're paying two people instead of one. Some challenges in doing pair programming. It can be quite difficult to convince managers to let two people work on the same task. So if this person doesn't understand Agile that well, the person may think that this is a waste of time and money. It is not, as we just saw. It is out of our comfort zone, so it is definitely tricky to program in front of someone. You need some practice, um, and this can be a point of resistance. There can be some strong code ownership feeling at the company. For example, I am the only person that can touch that part of the system. It is my baby, only I touch it. And this doesn't happen when you're doing pair programming, because everyone will touch the entire software. So you have to reduce this code ownership thing. And finally, if you have a bad physical working environment, like you don't have workstations that support pair programming, this can be quite tricky, right? So you need to make sure that the environment allows you to do pair programming. In many companies, they have now big tables with two monitors so that pair programming becomes natural and becomes productive. Some small mistakes we see in practice. People forget to rotate the pairs. Um, so usually, if you're in a team with 5, 6, 7 people, everyone pairs program with everyone because everyone has something to teach and something to learn. So rotate the pairs. But then, as soon as you're in one pair programming session, you also doesn't change the driver and the co-pilot. So even if you're doing pair programming with someone else, try to switch from times to times. Who's the driver and who's the co-pilot? No communication between developers. If you just put two people in there in front of the computer and they are not talking to each other, then you're wasting time and money, right? The main benefit of pair programming comes from communication. Uh, be aware that sometimes we are very opinionated and we may try to dictate how things should be done instead of brainstorming and designing them together. So a pair programming is a social activity, two people working on the problem work together, okay? Your boss decides the pairs. This definitely seems a bad idea. The team should decide who programs with who. If you have a very big imbalance between the skills of two people, you have a very senior person and one very junior person, maybe pair programming won't be that efficient. Maybe this person needs some coaching before he or she can pair program with someone in the team. So be sure you understand the difference between coaching and pair programming. And should you pair all the time? Well, maybe not, right? There's no silver bullet. Uh, you will find situations where pair programming is better. My personal opinion is I usually like to do pair programming when I'm doing some complex task and this task needs another person to think with me. But if I'm doing some straightforward task, like fixing a very simple bug, changing very small things on my software, well, I don't feel the need of doing pair programming. But you're gonna come up with the best practices for your team as soon as you start doing it. Pair programming is also quite popular. And that was this lecture.